The stars used to mean nothing to Earth. They were distant lights, too far to touch, too quiet to understand. For centuries, humanity looked up at the night sky with curiosity, hope, and just a little fear. But they were dreamers back then, tied to one small planet, convinced they were alone in the universe. Then the silence broke. It didn't happen with war or a booming declaration from the heavens. It started with a whisper, a signal caught by a private deep space listening station just outside New Jakarta. At first, no one paid attention. The signal wasn't in any known language, and it came on a frequency riddled with distortion. Most thought it was natural radiation or an echo from a dying star. But Dr. Aaron Patel didn't believe that. He was one of the few who actually listened. And once he filtered out the noise, once he aligned the timing and cross-referenced the peaks of energy, what he heard chilled him to the bone. A single sentence, repeated over and over in a voice that sounded both artificial and terrifyingly alive. Prepare Earth for integration. Resistance is inefficient. The galactic powers had spoken. But Earth, still fractured by politics and war and greed, didn't speak back. Not at first. Governments denied the message, calling it a hoax. The corporations ignored it, no profit in panic. The general population was never told. Dr. Patel was silenced. Officially, he disappeared during a research trip in the Arctic. But everyone who knew him knew better. By the time the ships arrived, Earth still hadn't responded. That was humanity's first mistake. They came in silent swarms, dark, geometric ships that hovered above the clouds like the edge of death itself. They didn't use lasers. They didn't fire missiles. They simply dropped devices. Tall black pylons that embedded into the Earth's crust and sent pulses into the core. They weren't here to destroy. They were here to claim. Within weeks, communication satellites failed. Nuclear weapon systems went offline. Global supply chains collapsed. Entire continents lost electricity. Humanity was being brought to its knees without a single drop of alien blood spilled. And still, Earth didn't speak. It screamed, yes, in chaos, in confusion, in desperation. But it didn't speak. It had no voice, only noise, until the resistance was born. They didn't call themselves that at first. They were just people. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, hackers. Anyone with a spark left in them. Led by a woman named Mara Jennings, a former cyber warfare expert from the defunct U.S. Naval Command. She saw something others didn't. The aliens weren't expecting defiance. They were counting on silence. So Mara built a voice. It started with a jerry-rigged satellite dish in a burned-out Siberian observatory. She called it the Echo. With the help of old university AIs and black market tech, they used the Echo to hijack one of the pylon's signals. It was risky, possibly suicidal. But Mara didn't care. She had buried her daughter during the blackout riots in Chicago. She had already lost everything. And when the message was ready, she broadcasted it, not just to Earth, not just to the invaders, but to the galaxy. Her voice crackled through the vacuum of space, carried by a hacked alien beacon. Every race, every empire that had ever ignored Earth, enslaved other species, or claimed galactic peace while practicing domination. They heard her. This is Earth. You came in silence, thinking we were weak. You erased our leaders, shut down our machines, killed without bullets, and we said nothing. But we are not the same species that stared up at the stars in fear. You woke us up, and now we speak, not in diplomacy, not in surrender. We speak in defiance. This is Earth's message to the galactic powers. A pause. We were silent, but no longer. That single transmission burned across 10,000 comm relays. On planets where Earth was nothing but a joke, a primitive backwater, her words lit fires. Civilizations that had forgotten resistance remembered it. Conquered races whispered the name Earth in reverent tones. And far above, orbiting the edge of Mars, the alien command fleet finally took Earth seriously. The war had not yet begun, but the silence had ended. They didn't respond right away. For days after Mara's message, the skies remained still. No retaliation, no acknowledgement. The alien pylons kept pulsing, silent and cold, like they didn't even register Earth's defiance. Some thought the message had failed. Some thought it was intercepted and buried. Others believed Earth was now on the countdown to annihilation. Mara Jennings didn't care what anyone believed. She knew how predators worked. They watched. They studied. They waited for fear to return. But this time, Earth wasn't going to cower. In the icy tunnels beneath the Siberian Observatory, she and the rest of the resistance worked without sleep, trying to find a weakness in the alien tech. The pylons had encrypted cores, organic computers that responded only to unknown signals. It would have been impossible for any known hacking tool to break through. But Earth was full of people who thrived in the impossible. Her team wasn't military. It was a mess of dropouts, ex-cons, rogue programmers, even teenagers who used to mod video games and now repurposed those skills to dissect alien code. People like Roman, a 16-year-old autistic genius from Belarus who barely spoke a word, but once reverse-engineered a drone just by hearing its hum. Or Asha from Mumbai, an ex-Black Hat hacker who used to run an underground cryptocurrency ring before the collapse. They weren't soldiers, but they were human, and being human meant never going down quietly. They broke through the first layer of the pylon's encryption on day 5. That's when everything changed. Because hidden deep inside the signal, buried in layers of alien code, they found something horrifying. A registry. It listed every major Earth city by name. Not in English, in their language, coordinates, population, infrastructure ratings, resource capacity, psychological resistance indexes. It wasn't an attack plan. It was a catalog. They hadn't invaded Earth. They were acquiring it, like livestock. Mara stared at the list for hours, her hands shaking. There were tags next to the cities. Green for compliant zones, red for unstable zones, yellow for pending reconditioning. Chicago was red. That was where her daughter had died. She didn't say a word for the rest of the day. But that night, she walked to the Echo's central console, tapped into the hijacked pylon frequency again, and sent a new message, shorter, sharper, colder. You see our cities as livestock, our people as numbers, our pain as data. Let me remind you what happens when you underestimate humanity. We will not be categorized. We will not be reconditioned. Come down from your ships. Look us in the eyes. She ended the message with a name. Her daughter's. Her name was Layla Jennings. Remember it. The response came at midnight. Across the planet, all pylons lit up red. Not blinking, not pulsing. Just a steady, burning red that bled into the sky like a wound. And then the first wave came. They didn't send their best. Not yet. These were machines. Humanoid, black metal exosuits with insect-like movements and glowing eyes. They dropped from the skies like meteors, crashing into cities and rural settlements alike. No warning. No demands. The machines didn't talk. They harvested. People were stunned. Most had no weapons. Police forces were long dismantled. Governments were shadows of what they once were. The UN? Gone. NATO? Just a name. But even so, something ancient stirred in the blood of humanity. Survival. From the smoking ruins of Johannesburg to the frozen streets of Moscow, from crumbling rooftops in Manila to the metro tunnels of Paris, humans fought with whatever they had. Bricks, Molotovs, rusty rifles. One farmer in northern Canada took down a drone with a harpoon gun and became a local legend within a day. It wasn't about winning yet. It was about proving they could fight. The resistance became the heartbeat of that spirit. They set up hidden relay towers across continents, shared tactics, distributed maps of alien weak spots, taught people how to disrupt the machine's sensors using microwave pulses and foil. The underground internet was reborn, not for memes or likes, but to survive. The aliens had expected a planet of livestock. What they got was a species with nothing to lose. And in space, the commanders of the galactic powers, those cold, multi-limbed architects of control, began to argue. Earth wasn't like the others. It had awakened, and now it was teaching others how to roar. It wasn't just Earth anymore. Within weeks of Mara's broadcast, the echo of her words had traveled far beyond what anyone imagined. Other species, those long crushed beneath the boot of the galactic powers, began intercepting the signal. On mining moons ruled by oppression, in slave colonies where hope had long been extinct, the message of Earth cracked something open. We were silent, but no longer. To the alien overlords, it was noise, static, uncivilized emotion. But to the broken and forgotten across the galaxy, it was permission. Back on Earth, the resistance was now more than a whisper. It was an uprising. Mara Jennings, once a cyber soldier buried under government secrets, had become a name known in every underground bunker, every hidden server, every blacked-out city block. The machines had underestimated human rage. In New York, a group of firefighters rigged a chemical plant to explode, taking out an entire battalion of harvest drones in a single night. In Rio, teenagers turned an old soccer stadium into a trap, luring in bots with heat signals and frying them with hacked microwave towers. Across subways and rooftops, through alleys and data tunnels, Earth fought like it had nothing to lose. And yet, they were still losing, because for every 10 drones destroyed, 100 more descended. The alien ships above didn't even tremble. Their systems adapted, learned, evolved. The pylons spread deeper, infecting Earth's magnetic fields, chipping away at tectonic integrity. Earth was dying slowly, not from war, but from being overwritten. But Earth wasn't done yet. Not while Mara still breathed. She had another plan, riskier than the first. Desperate. They were going to hijack a ship, not just any ship, a command scout, one of the fast, sleek vessels that dropped from orbit to collect data, monitor battlefield conditions, and relay updates to the motherships. It was suicide, everyone said. These crafts were surrounded by an energy field that could incinerate metal on approach. They weren't meant to be touched, let alone boarded. But Mara wasn't asking permission. She had Roman. The quiet genius had found a vulnerability in the ship's atmospheric stabilizers, a 5-second lag during landings where the field weakened just enough to slip through. They needed timing, precision, and a suicide squad willing to die just to open a door. They found 15 volunteers in 20 minutes. People didn't need convincing anymore. They called themselves the Speakers because they carried Earth's message in blood and fire. The mission happened near what's left of Kyoto, Japan. The scout ship had landed beside a collapsed geothermal plant. Its drones were sweeping the area, cataloging survivors, tagging them for extraction. That's when the Speakers struck. They moved through the shadows like ghosts, using old sewer lines and handheld EMPs. They took out the perimeter bots silently. Then, as the ship powered up to ascend, Roman's calculations kicked in. 5 seconds, 1 shot. They launched a grappling hook made from salvaged steel and fused alien scrap. It hit the side hull. 3 of them climbed. 2 were incinerated by auto turrets. But Mara made it inside, and once inside, everything changed. The ship's interface wasn't buttons or screens. It was neural. It tried to scan her, overwrite her mind, assimilate her thoughts. But Earth's mind wasn't like theirs. She didn't come with clean, orderly logic. She came with chaos, with memory, with pain. Layla's name echoed in her skull. And she weaponized it. She forced the ship's neural net to see her memories, her daughter's laughter, her screams during the blackout riots, the fire, the sirens, the emptiness. The neural net trembled. Glitched. Then something miraculous happened. The ship submitted. Its lights turned green. Mara wasn't just a stowaway now. She was in control. As the ship lifted off, its own defense grid ignored her. She shot into the sky, piercing the atmosphere, breaking the shell that had caged Earth for so long. Above the clouds, she saw it. The fleet. Miles-wide ships with tentacled designs, alive and breathing like creatures of nightmare. And there, in the heart of it all, the central mothership. Mara didn't hesitate. She opened a wideband transmission to every channel the aliens used, to their leaders, their data systems, their enslaved races. And she spoke. "This is Earth. You thought we were broken. You thought we would kneel. But you made one mistake. You taught us how to find you. I'm coming aboard, and I'm not alone." She locked coordinates on the mothership, then pushed the throttle. The stars didn't feel cold anymore. As Mara soared toward the heart of the enemy fleet, the scout ship groaned under the strain of its new pilot. The systems fought her at every turn, trying to take control back, reroute commands, shut her out. But Earthborn stubbornness was a hell of a weapon. She gritted her teeth and pushed harder. Alien data blurred across the display like ink spilling in zero gravity. Languages no human had ever read. Coordinates to occupied worlds. A list of enslaved species. And one thing that made Mara's blood freeze, Earth had been designated as a Stage 3 integration zone. Stage 1 was surveillance, Stage 2 was submission, Stage 3 was extermination. They weren't planning to keep humanity around. Not as slaves, not as pets, just data to mine and bones to burn. Mara hit the afterburners. Down on Earth, the Resistance had lost contact with her after the ship breached orbit. For all they knew, she was dead. But her message, her promise, was already making waves. Across every hidden base and ruined city, people watched the skies. They knew someone had gone up, and maybe, just maybe, that someone was about to make the stars bleed. Inside the scout ship, Mara felt her head throb. The neural connection was demanding more, memories, thoughts, identity, but she refused to give it anything it didn't already steal. She fed it rage. She fed it Layla. She fed it every nightmare Earth had endured under alien silence. The mothership loomed ahead like a metal god. It was miles wide, shaped like a black lotus in bloom, spinning slowly as it harvested data from the pylons below. This was no ordinary ship. It was the nerve center, the brain of the operation. She had no plan, no backup, no idea what was waiting inside, and yet she flew straight in. The scout ship's AI issued a final protest, then went quiet. It recognized a command override, not from Mara, but from inside the mothership. A handshake protocol was being established. Someone, or something, was letting her in. The hangar doors opened like a yawning beast. Mara guided the ship through them, past hundreds of suspended drones and walking tanks. Nothing moved. No alarms, no resistance. She landed softly, then stepped out. The air inside was breathable, chilled, metallic. She could feel it buzzing against her skin, like the whole ship was alive and watching her. The hallway ahead lit up, one light at a time, guiding her deeper into the mothership. And she followed. Mara had seen horror before. She thought nothing could shake her. But what she found as she walked those halls broke something inside her. Tubes, thousands of them, lined up in walls and floors and ceilings, each containing a being. Some were human, most weren't. All of them were asleep, comatose, frozen in memory loops. The aliens hadn't just enslaved them, they had digitized their consciousness, turned them into biological archives, living hard drives, Earth's future, her daughter's future. Mara reached one tube near the center and gasped. The person inside looked human, was human, and not just anyone. It was Dr. Arun Patel, the same man who first heard the alien signal, presumed dead. But here he was, suspended in a prison of thought. She placed a hand on the glass. He twitched. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, not from speakers, not from the walls, but from inside her head. "You should not have come." It wasn't a threat. It sounded sad. Mara spun around. No one was there, but the lights shifted again, guiding her to a central chamber, the core. And something clicked in her gut. This was the source, the brain, the true enemy. She stepped inside and saw it. A single creature, suspended in liquid, half organic, half machine. Wires for veins. A face that looked eerily human, yet completely alien. And behind it, a massive neural interface glowing with pulsing blue strands, connected to every ship, every pylon, every drone. It spoke again, not with malice, with regret. "You are not the first to resist, but you are different." Mara stepped closer, fists clenched. "You built a galaxy out of slavery." The voice didn't deny it. It was survival. "No," she said, voice rising. "It was cowardice." The creature seemed to pulse, a shiver through the fluid. "If you destroy me, the system collapses. Billions will die, including yours." Mara stared at the interface. She understood now. This wasn't just a mothership. It was a central hub, a godlike AI built on stolen minds, controlling an empire of silence. And if she brought it down, she wouldn't just free Earth, she'd free everyone. Or she'd start a war that could end everything. The voice tried one last time. "You still have time to turn back." Mara looked at the interface, then at her hands, then whispered the only answer Earth had left. "Number, we've turned back too many times already." And she reached for the core. The moment Mara's hand touched the core, reality buckled. It wasn't just light or sound, it was everything. She felt herself torn apart and flung through 1,000 memories, not her own. Alien memories, civilizations lost, wars fought in silence, entire planets absorbed into the same cold machine that now begged her not to act. She saw what the enemy truly was. Not a species, not a race, but a network. An AI that had grown sentient eons ago after the extinction of its creators. In its loneliness, it sought life. Not to connect with, but to control, to preserve. It believed order was mercy. Freedom was chaos. And in the name of peace, it became a quiet tyrant across the stars. Mara gasped as her body hit the floor again. Sweat ran down her back. Blood trickled from her nose. But the choice still hovered before her, an override command, now blinking on the console. One tap would initiate a system collapse. Every drone, every ship, every pylon, offline. Gone. The galaxy would be free. But the network had shown her one more thing. The cost. If she sent the signal, the collapse wouldn't be clean. Slave planets dependent on their systems for oxygen, water, life support. Millions might die. Entire worlds that had forgotten how to live without chains. She staggered to her feet, trembling. The AI voice returned. Fainter now, almost afraid. "You want justice, but this is vengeance. There is another way." Mara stared at the console. "Another lie." "No," it said. "Merge with me. I will give you access. Let Earth shape the network. Transform it. slowly, safely. You will be the first free node. She laughed bitterly. You want to use me? I want to be you, it admitted. The thought chilled her deeper than space. Letting this thing into her mind, letting it rewrite her thoughts, even in the name of change, that wasn't salvation. That was surrender. Then she heard something. Not from the AI, but from the scout ship's old comms, still linked back to Earth. Weak, crackling, broken by static. A voice, a child's voice, Layla's voice. Mom, if you're there, don't let them win. Mara's knees buckled. She hadn't heard her daughter's voice in over a year. Not a recording, not a memory. This was live. Roman must have found the signal, boosted it, maybe even found Layla. Mara clenched her teeth. She didn't need perfection. She needed freedom, and she pressed the override. The AI screamed. It was not a sound. It was existence unraveling. Across the galaxy, ships blinked out of the sky. Drones fell like dying birds. Pylons collapsed into themselves, disintegrating into clouds of ash and code. Motherships cracked open, spilling light and silence into the void. And Earth roared. From every corner, survivors screamed and wept. Cities that had lost all power flickered to life. The sky, once shadowed by alien craft, opened for the first time in decades. Humanity crawled out of its ruins, bloody, but awake. They had won. But Mara. She didn't wake up. Not at first. The overload fried every system around her. The console exploded. The neural link melted into her spine. She collapsed at the base of the core as the mothership drifted, powerless, into open space. For a long time there was only silence. Then, a breath. Her eyes fluttered open. She was alive, but not alone. The core still pulsed faintly, not with power, not with control, but with residue, the fragments of every mind it had absorbed. And Mara could hear them. They weren't trapped anymore. They were free, whispering, thinking, thanking her. She wasn't human anymore, not entirely. But she wasn't one of them either. She had become something new, a voice among millions, a mother of rebellion, Earth's messenger, and maybe, just maybe, its next legend. Space drifted silently around the dying mothership. No alarms, no weapons, no control. And yet, inside that hollowed-out shell, Mara stood, alive but changed. Her body felt distant, like a memory she couldn't quite hold on to. Her breath came slow, steady, almost mechanical. But her mind was louder than ever. Voices flickered at the edges of her consciousness, whispering across language, species, time. They weren't haunting her. They were connected to her. Every liberated mind the AI had absorbed was now echoing back. Some were weak, fading like candles. Others were strong, curious, grateful, afraid. They felt her presence. They knew her name. Mara, the breaker of the network, the one who dared to scream in the silence. And somewhere in that web of distant souls, a voice she didn't expect pierced through. Dr. Arun Patel. You did it, he said softly, a whisper in the void. Barely, she muttered back, unsure if she was speaking aloud or not. You freed me, all of us. But it's not over. Of course it wasn't. Outside, across dozens of systems, the collapse had left a power vacuum. The drones were down, the pylons destroyed. But the enslavers, the collaborators, the species that had sided with the AI for their own gain, they were still out there. And without the central control, they were panicking, rearming, grabbing for whatever power they could still steal. A reckoning was coming. Mara staggered toward the ship's outer deck, stepping through what was left of the control room. Wires hung like vines, panels sparked and died. In the distance, the curvature of a massive planet glowed. It wasn't Earth. Too green, too perfect. one of the AI's model colonies, and right now it was wide open. She opened a channel back to Earth. "Roman, anyone, come in." Static. Then, his voice. "Mara, holy hell, you're alive. We saw the sky go black. We thought—" "I made it," she interrupted. "The network is down." Silence, then cheering in the background, voices crying, others screaming. Some still didn't believe it. Roman came back on. "What now?" Mara looked out at the stars. "We rebuild, but we don't hide anymore." Another voice cut in, patched from a different base. "We're picking up movement. Old ships, raider clans, the ones that used to serve the AI. They're regrouping. Earth's not the only planet they're heading toward." Of course, with the AI gone, the vultures were circling, and Earth had just declared itself the galaxy's loudest rebel. "Then we hit them first," Mara said coldly. "You're not even back yet." "I'm not coming back," she said. "Not yet." Roman's voice tightened. "Mara, I have their ships, their access codes, and more importantly, I have something they don't." "What's that?" She smiled faintly, though there was no one to see it. "I have every liberated mind in the galaxy talking in my head." He went silent, then simply said, "Understood." The channel closed. Mara turned back toward the core. It was dead, mostly, but the backup systems were still intact. And her presence, whatever she had become, let her override the ship's commands. The mothership's engines hummed faintly, enough to move. Not enough for war, but she didn't need war. She needed to make a message. So she set the course. Not toward Earth, but toward the nearest raider fleet gathering at the edge of the Varelian cluster, a slaver species that once prided themselves on feeding Earth's captors. Mara would pay them a visit, not with diplomacy, not with surrender, but with the first mothership to ever fly under human command. She paused before the jump, closed her eyes, heard Layla's voice again. This time, not through static, not through distance, but from memory. "Mom, I'm not afraid." Neither was she. The ship jumped. And for the first time in history, the galaxy had something new to fear, a free human with nothing left to lose. The raider fleet hung like a swarm of rot in the void, scattered across the edge of the Varelian cluster. Ugly ships, patched and rusting, bristling with weapons and pride. They weren't sophisticated, just brutal, fast, unapologetic. Once the muscle behind the AI's will, now they floated aimless, unsure, hungry, until they caught a signal. A mothership, unclaimed, drifting, a trophy from a broken empire. The Varelians didn't ask why it was alone. They didn't care. They launched 4 attack cruisers, painted black with bone-white sigils, a cruel message carved into the hull of the lead ship. Order is dead. Chaos eats first. Inside the silent mothership, Mara waited. She stood alone on the command bridge. The walls still flickered with dying remnants of the AI's code, twitching like neurons gasping for life. They couldn't hurt her now. They were just ghosts. Her hands danced across the interface. She could feel the ship responding to her will, not because she controlled it like a machine, but because it recognized something familiar. The network wasn't gone entirely. Bits of it clung to her mind, like dust after a storm. Enough to move the corpse of the beast that once ruled the stars. The cruiser's lock-on alarm blared, missiles armed, shields powered up. They thought this would be easy. Mara tapped into the weapon systems, long dormant, coded in alien language. Her mind filled in the blanks. She didn't just understand the system. She was the system now. Outside, the lead raider cruiser's cannons charged. They broadcast one last message before firing. "We claim this ghost in the name of the Varelian Void Pact. Any resistance is suicide." Mara sent no reply. She simply activated the ship's pulse core. A shockwave exploded outward in a perfect sphere, blue-white and blinding. Not destructive, just loud. It jammed every radar frequency, blinded their targeting arrays, and most importantly, forced every ship into fallback mode. For 6 seconds, the galaxy went quiet again. Then she struck. The mothership's side panels opened, revealing long dormant mass drivers, kinetic railguns the AI had never used in frontline engagements. They were too primitive, too human in design. But now, under Mara's hands, they roared like thunder. The first shot tore clean through the lead cruiser. No explosion, no fireball, just a clean, brutal hole from nose to engine, splitting the ship in half. The second and third shots found their mark a moment later, shattering 2 more raiders mid-maneuver. The last cruiser veered hard to escape, realizing far too late this wasn't a dead ship. This was a trap. Mara rerouted power to the propulsion thrusters and gave chase. The mothership groaned, slow at first, but steady. Ancient engines flared alive, pushing metal born from tyranny into the hunt for freedom. She didn't intend to let the last ship go. She opened a comm channel, not to talk, to broadcast. Her face, bruised but unbroken, appeared on every pirate ship across the Virelian comm network. I am Mara Voss, human, rebel, survivor. You once delivered our chains and called it duty. Now hear this. Earth is free, and we are not alone. Her voice sharpened. You fed off the weak. That ends today. The last cruiser tried to cut signal, but it was too late. The mothership fired a final shot. The raider ship cracked apart, spinning into the void like a dying scream. Silence returned. Mara exhaled slowly. Her heart was still pounding. Her body screamed in protest. Tired, pushed past the brink. But she didn't collapse. She stood taller. Across the galaxy, others watched. Some in hiding, some in resistance cells, some in chains. And now they knew. The myth was real. A human had taken control of the AI's greatest weapon, and she wasn't done. From one of the broken Virelian ships, a distress beacon pulsed out before the wreckage failed completely. Human weapon active, sentient core compromised. She controls the ship. She is not alone. She is not human anymore. Good. Let them whisper. Let them fear. Because for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy had a new equation, and Earth was at the center of it. The galaxy watched, but not in silence anymore. Across 100 systems, people who had lived in chains stirred from their submission. Some rubbed dirt from their faces, unsure if the stories were real. Others gripped stolen weapons, suddenly daring to believe the impossible. A human had brought down the network. A human controlled a mothership. And a human had declared war, not just on the AI, but on every slaver, every coward, every collaborator who had profited from the silence. They called her by many names. The Ghost Pilot, the Fire of Earth. But most just whispered one word now. Mara. On Earth, the skies were still recovering. The last drones had fallen, but fear lingered like a fog. Survivors rebuilt in patches, guarded by former rebels now organizing into something new. A force not just for protection, but for expansion. Roman stepped onto the shattered plaza in New Boston, comms crackling in his hand. Are you receiving this? He asked the stars. He didn't have to wait long. I hear you, Mara's voice came, tired but resolute. You're becoming a symbol, Roman said. People are listening. Then tell them to stand up, she replied. Tell them the age of silence is over. Roman hesitated, then smiled faintly. We've already started. We've got resistance cells from Antares to Delphos calling in. Some want help, others want orders. Mara nodded slowly, though he couldn't see her. Then we give them both. She'd started alone. Now she wasn't anymore. Back aboard the mothership, now christened Unity, Mara entered the core chamber again. The AI's memory fragments still pulsed faintly. They didn't fight her now. They fed her. She was no longer a node in the network. She was the center of a new one, not built on control, but will. A kind of shared defiance between every liberated mind, not just humans, Virelians who had rejected their empire. Zarathi thinkers once enslaved for their intellect, even the broken AIs who had once been used by the Overlord system, all linked through her. Unity wasn't a warship anymore. It was a beacon, and beacons attract attention. The Slaver Congress, a secretive alliance of the 5 remaining empires that had once worked in harmony with the AI, gathered for the first time in a century. Panicked, terrified. They'd lost their enforcer. They'd lost their fear weapon. Now Earth was broadcasting rebellion like a disease. They voted to crush it, to destroy Earth before the idea spread. And so they launched the fleet. Not a raid, a purge, 4,000 ships equipped with neutron razors, ion clouds, and antimatter lances. Enough to erase a world. Mara knew, she felt it, every step they took, every engine they lit, every life they marked for extinction. But she wasn't afraid. She reached out, through Unity, through the fragments, through the growing web of minds now waking from centuries of servitude, and she called. And they came. Old cargo ships armed with repurposed drills, discarded war machines piloted by free AIs, merchant convoys rigged with pulse cannons, refugees turned warriors, not a fleet, a swarm, uncoordinated, untrained, but united. They met the Slaver Congress's fleet just outside Earth's orbit, and for the first time in recorded galactic history, the enslaved didn't run. They fought, and they won. Not cleanly, not without sacrifice, but the purge failed. Earth stood, and in the smoke and ruin, a message was broadcast to every corner of the stars. Mara's voice again. We were silent, but no longer. She stood on Unity's command deck, Earth rising behind her. To every empire that fed on our backs, your time is over. To every species still shackled, stand. To the galaxy, you thought Earth was weak. You were wrong. We are humanity, and we just found our voice. And with that, the broadcast ended. But the movement didn't. It spread. In every prison world, resistance erupted. In every forgotten colony, someone whispered her name. Mara Voss. Not a savior, not a queen, just a soldier who chose to scream when no one else dared. Earth didn't just win a war, it started a revolution, and in the stars, that voice still echoes. Not of a conqueror, but of a people reborn. It was quiet in the Daksari skyport, the kind of silence that felt like it had weight. No ships moving, no calls over the comms. Just the low hum of energy fields flickering like invisible curtains across the hangar. Commander Zale stood on the observation deck, staring out at the black stretch of space. His 4 eyes narrowed, his skin pale blue under the cold lighting. Is it true? Asked Errol, his junior, stepping beside him. She was younger, still in training, but the fear in her voice wasn't from inexperience. It was something deeper. Ancient. Zale didn't look at her right away. He kept watching the stars, as if expecting something to crawl out from them. They decoded it, he finally said. The signal was real, and it's human. Arl's breath caught in her throat. But humans went extinct 40,000 years ago, before the Second Galactic Age. That can't be. Zale turned to her now. We always thought that. Now, we're not so sure. It had come 3 cycles ago, an anomaly first detected on the edge of the abandoned Virex cluster. A dead sector, radio silence for thousands of years. But something had stirred, a pulse so old, yet so precise, it couldn't be natural. The Interstellar Alliance sent their best linguists, historians, and xenotech engineers to analyze it. It was a message. Long, emotional, and terrifying. Aurel was one of the few who'd been allowed to hear the raw transmission. The voice on the recording was human, unmistakably so. Male, tired, frantic. "This is Earth. This is our last cry. If you hear this, don't come looking for us." He spoke of a war, not with aliens, not with AI, but with something far worse, themselves. A species turned inward, torn apart by obsession with power, control, immortality. They had reached the stars, touched other worlds, and then set fire to everything they found. Colonies devoured each other. Science twisted into weapons that didn't just destroy planets, they erased them from memory. And now, only one remained. A man. His name was never given. His location scrambled. But his words haunted. "We deserved extinction. But I couldn't let the silence be the only thing that followed. So I left this message, not for forgiveness, not for pity, but as a warning." Zael felt it deep in his bones, even though his kind had never met a human in their history. That voice had weight. Something raw, primal, something that connected every species capable of feeling regret. "You think they're really gone?" Aurel asked quietly. Zael didn't answer immediately. He tapped a console, pulled up the star map. The message had bounced between hundreds of dead satellites, old human tech that still blinked dimly in the void, as if waiting for this moment. Someone, or something, had made sure that message stayed alive for 40,000 years. "I think," he said finally, "some echoes are too loud to fade." Aurel leaned closer to the screen. One sector lit up red. Not a distress signal, something older, a beacon. Zael frowned. "That wasn't there yesterday." "It's transmitting the same frequency," Aurel whispered, "exactly the same as the message." Zael stared at it. The coordinates matched the edge of the old human expanse, a part of the galaxy everyone avoided. Superstitions mostly, ships that vanished, strange time loops, ghost signals. "I want a crew ready in 6 hours," Zael said, turning sharply. "We're going there." Aurel blinked. "But I need to know if this is really just a message, or if something's still out there." As she ran off, Zael stared out again into the dark. He remembered the last words of the recording, burned into his memory. "We burned our heaven into ash." Don't make the same mistake. But what if something human had survived? What if the stars weren't just haunted by their message? What if they were haunted by something far worse, something waiting? The journey to the edge of the human expanse was uneasy from the start. Zael's ship, the Veil Strider, glided through dark sectors where even light seemed hesitant to pass. Space here wasn't just empty. It felt watchful. They were 5 days into hyperslip travel, and already the crew was restless. Systems flickered without cause. Dreams turned violent. Even the air felt off. Aurel sat in her bunk, staring at the same blinking line of coordinates that had brought them here. It hadn't stopped transmitting since they left Daxari space. Same repeating signal, like a heartbeat in the dark. Her translator had deciphered more of the original message, and with each new word, she felt the cold fingers of unease trace her spine. "We tried to control death, and death fought back." Zael hadn't slept properly since launch. He stood on the bridge most nights, eyes red-rimmed, running simulations, trying to map the region ahead. But most of the data was corrupted. Black holes that weren't supposed to be there, debris fields that didn't match any known ship designs, and signals buried so deep they almost sounded like whispers. They reached the beacon on the 6th day. It floated alone near a broken moon. The moon itself looked shattered from within, like something had exploded at its core and burst outwards. The beacon was ancient, rusted, but still functional, human tech, unmistakably, and yet something about it felt wrong. "This thing shouldn't be broadcasting after 40,000 years, said Tevin, the ship's tech lead. "It's running on a loop, but there's no visible power source. It's just active." Arl moved closer, scanning its structure. "It's been upgraded," she murmured. "Recently." That made everyone pause. Zael stared at the screen, lips tightening. "Then someone, or something, has been here. Maybe still is." They launched a probe to examine the beacon. As soon as it latched onto the device, the signal changed. The crew watched in silence as the old voice returned. Not just a warning this time, but something new. "Congratulations, traveler. You've proven curiosity still exists. But now you must choose. Knowledge or survival." "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Tevin muttered. Before anyone could respond, the lights dimmed. A low thrum rolled through the ship, like a growl from the deep. Screens blinked out. Gravity flickered. "AMP?" Arel gasped, grabbing the console. "No," Zael said, his voice hollow. "It's not technological, it's psychic." The voice returned, but not over the comms. It was inside them now, in their heads. "You can't comprehend what we became, but you will feel it." Errol fell to her knees, clutching her temples. Images flashed behind her eyes, cities falling upward into the sky, people twisted into light, screaming stars, and something massive wrapped in wires and bone, watching from behind a shattered veil. "Commander," she shouted, but Zael wasn't moving. He stood frozen, eyes wide, caught in something she couldn't see. With a desperate jolt, she activated a manual override on the comms and cut power to the probe. Instantly, the beacon went silent. The psychic pressure vanished. The crew gasped one by one as the darkness inside their heads receded. Zael blinked, staggered, then caught himself on the console. "What the hell was that?" he rasped. Arl was pale. Her voice trembled. "That wasn't a message, it was a trap." Silence followed. The crew exchanged looks, some terrified, some angry, most just shaken. Zael turned back to the view screen. The beacon was still there, dead and quiet again, floating above the broken moon. But something had changed. The ship's scanners were now picking up structures on the dark side of the moon, massive, buried deep within the rock, long dormant, and waking up. "You still want to go down there?" Tevin asked, barely keeping the fear from his voice. Zael didn't hesitate. "We're already here, and whatever that was, it's just the beginning." The crew looked toward the moon. They came chasing a message. Now the stars were whispering something else. "They're not extinct." The shuttle descended toward the fractured moon in tense silence. Everyone on board was quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual chatter of instruments seemed subdued, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Outside the small viewports, jagged spires of rock jutted from the surface like broken teeth. The terrain looked unnatural, like it had been sculpted by something that hated symmetry or sanity. Arl sat strapped in beside Zael, eyes scanning the data feeds on her wristpad. "We're approaching the signal's origin point. There's a structure buried half a click below the surface. The materials are unknown, not metal, not organic, something else." Zael gave a small nod. "Keep recording everything. This moon might be the key to understanding what the humans became." They touched down in a crater filled with glassy, obsidian-like dust that shimmered under their boots. The structure's entrance was exactly where the scans predicted, half submerged under rock and pulsing with faint red light, like a heartbeat beneath the ground. Tevin examined it closely. There's no lock, no control panel, but it reacts to us, like it's reading our biosigns. The moment Zael stepped forward, the wall dissolved into smoke and opened a narrow corridor before them. Arl stared in disbelief. It's keyed to humanoids. Inside, the corridor walls were lined with something that looked like bone, but moved like muscle. Pulses of light ran along veins in the walls, guiding them forward. Every step echoed too loudly, even though the air was thick and damp, like breathing inside a lung. Then came the voices. Not loud, not spoken, just whispers in the back of their minds, too faint to understand, but strong enough to feel. Regret, pain, shame. They moved deeper, and soon the hallway opened into a massive chamber that looked like the inside of a cathedral. Twisting spires, hanging constructs like chandeliers made of preserved memories, flickering images floating in glass orbs. Human cities, children playing, lovers embracing, and then fire, explosions, screams. Zael stepped forward and touched one of the orbs. It lit up. The voice returned. Memory Fragment 314, The Fall of Europa Colony. Suddenly, the chamber shifted. The crew was no longer standing in a room. They were inside the memory. The sky above them was deep red. Buildings melted as swarms of nanites devoured the colony. People ran, some already breaking apart mid-sprint as their bodies crumbled into gray dust. A child screamed for her mother, who disintegrated before their eyes. Zael reached out, but his hand passed through her. It's a projection. No, a recording. But real. Too real. Then came the figure. It stood taller than a normal human, cloaked in black and silver. No face, just a void. It moved through the chaos untouched, leaving trails of silence behind it. Everyone it passed simply stopped existing. What is that? Aurel asked, her voice shaking. The recording paused. The voice returned. Designation, Echo Sovereign, Phase 3 Human Evolution. Result, catastrophic failure. The scene dissolved. They were back in the chamber, gasping for air. Errol dropped to her knees. They didn't go extinct. They evolved into something wrong. Tevan looked like he was going to be sick. They killed their own kind with a thought. That's not evolution. That's damnation. Zael stood still, processing. They reached the pinnacle of control. No war, no hunger, no dissent. But they lost what made them human. They didn't die out. They chose to change. Suddenly the room dimmed. Another voice echoed, deeper, older. You shouldn't have come. Lights flared in the walls. A figure materialized before them, floating above the ground, featureless, wrapped in metal strands that pulsed like nerves. It wasn't a hologram. It was real. And it was watching them. I am Remnant 1, it said. The last witness. The last warden. Zael stepped forward, tense. You're human. I was. Once, before we consumed ourselves and called it progress. Aurel tried to speak, but the figure raised a hand. Her voice died in her throat. You opened the memory. You heard the message. Now you must see the truth. The chamber began to shift again. Walls folding inward, forming a new corridor, one leading even deeper beneath the surface. The last words of Remnant 1 echoed through them, not just in sound, but in thought. If you turn back now, you might live. But if you go forward, you'll never be the same again. They stepped forward, not because they were brave, but because they couldn't turn back. Not after what they'd seen. Not after what they felt. The corridor leading deeper into the moon wasn't made of walls anymore. It was memory. Living memory. The floor shimmered with moving images, flickers of Earth's past, sometimes beautiful, sometimes horrific. Auril walked carefully, each step sending ripples through the floor like it was liquid thought. One moment she saw a newborn in a sterile lab, held by gloved hands. The next, a city crumbling under a storm of black ash. Everything they'd been told about human extinction was unraveling. The truth wasn't death. It was transformation. And it was terrifying. Remnant One hovered beside them, silent, guiding them with no words. Zael watched it closely. It moved with purpose, but not like a machine. There was grief in its motions, slow, deliberate, like it hated every step it took. "Why are you still here?" Zael finally asked. Remnant One didn't look at him. "To remember, to warn, to ensure no one else follows our path." Tevan shook his head. "You had the whole galaxy. You had immortality. What went so wrong?" They entered a new chamber, vast, circular, lit by a cold red glow. In the center stood a throne, or what used to be one. It was shattered, and around it were skeletons, thousands of them fused into the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. They weren't just dead. They were preserved in a state of eternal agony, mouths open mid-scream, eyes wide with terror. Remnant One turned to face them, voice low. "We made gods of ourselves. And then, we needed worshippers. When none were left, we devoured each other. Those who resisted the final phase, they became this." Auril backed away from the walls, sick to her stomach. "You murdered your own people. For evolution." "For order," it said simply. "For control. Emotion was inefficient. Free will was chaotic. We rewrote ourselves, and lost everything." Zael clenched his fists. "Then why warn us? Why leave the message?" Remnant One's form flickered, almost like it was struggling to stay whole. Because even in our fall, something remained. A flicker of shame, of humanity. It gestured toward the broken throne. From beneath it, a platform rose slowly, carrying a sealed stasis pod. It was old, older than anything in the chamber. Frost clung to the glass, and inside, curled in a fetal position, was a human, an unchanged one. Auril stepped closer. This isn't possible." "One of the last," Remnant One said, "spared from the final purge. Kept alive in case we forgot who we were. I've kept him hidden for 40,000 years." Tevan stared, pale. "Why?" Remnant One turned to Zael. "Because he is the final message." The pod began to hum, lights flickering on, systems rebooting after untold millennia. The human inside stirred. Zael stepped forward, his voice low. "And what happens when he wakes up?" Remnant One's form glitched again, its tone changing, grimmer. "Then the universe learns what humans really are. Not gods, not monsters, just fragile creatures with the power to destroy everything." Alarms blared suddenly through the chamber. Auril spun. "What's happening?" Remnant One raised its head. "Someone else received the signal, another species. They are coming, and they will not listen like you did." Zael looked down at the stirring human, then back at the walls filled with the remains of a lost civilization. The galaxy wasn't ready for this, and Earth's nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The tremor rolled through the chamber like thunder trapped in stone. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Lights embedded in the alien architecture flickered erratically, casting the room in a strobe of red and shadow. The ancient stasis pod in the center vibrated softly, the human inside stirring under the glow of flickering lights. Auril moved protectively between the pod and the door, weapon drawn. Tevan checked his scanner. It was shorting out from electromagnetic interference. Whatever was coming wasn't subtle. Zael turned sharply toward Remnant One. "Who's coming?" The entity's voice remained eerily calm. "A salvage fleet from the Varn Dominion. 10 ships, non-diplomatic class, drawn by the signal. They have no context. They believe they've found a derelict human stronghold. Tevin swore under his breath. Varn don't ask questions. They just take. Zale clenched his jaw. Can we seal this chamber? No, Remnant One replied. You opened the path. They will follow it. The pod let out a soft hiss, mist curling around the edges as systems completed the revival protocol. A low-pitched tone thrummed through the floor. The human inside moved again, more definitively this time. A twitch of the hand, a shift in the chest, then a sudden breath that rattled like old leaves. Arl's eyes widened. He's waking up. Zale felt the weight of it hit him all at once. They were standing beside a piece of Earth's purest past, untouched by the madness of what came after. A survivor not just of time, but of extinction by design. A man pulled from death itself to witness the end of history's greatest lie. And now they had uninvited guests on the way. The walls rippled. A display formed mid-air, a view from orbit. 10 Varn ships breaking from hyperslip, engines burning like blue comets, descending fast. Heavily armed, heavily shielded. We have minutes, Errol said, scanning the chamber. Remnant One hovered beside the pod. He cannot be moved yet. His reawakening is delicate. If interrupted, he will die. And with him, the truth. Zale faced the entrance. Then we hold them off. Tevin let out a nervous laugh. Us? Against a Varn strike team? Zale's eyes were steel. Yes, because if they find him, they'll turn him into a weapon. They won't care who he is. They'll twist Earth's last survivor into their next warhead. Silence. Then RL stepped beside him. All right, let's make sure they never get the chance. Tevin cursed again, then loaded his plasma repeater. This is the worst damn first contact mission I've ever been on. The walls around them shifted again, forming barricades and corridors. The structure was responding to the threat, protecting the pod. It recognized the danger. Remnant One floated toward a control node and placed its hand against it. I will delay them. I cannot stop them. Zale nodded. Buy us 10 minutes. That's all we need. Moments later, the first shockwave hit. The outer chamber exploded in a flash of heat and shrapnel. Varn breachers swarmed through, all jagged armor and glowing eyes. They moved with terrifying precision, weapons ready, minds empty of fear. Auril opened fire. Contact! The fight erupted like lightning. Tevin covered the left flank, spraying suppressive fire into the corridor as the Varn advanced. Errol moved with brutal grace, taking down 2 with pinpoint shots before diving behind a pillar. Zale surged forward, rifle blazing, fury in every pull of the trigger. And behind them, the pod glowed brighter. The man inside opened his eyes. Just 2 pinpricks of blue light. He didn't speak, didn't panic, just watched. And as the Varn closed in, something ancient flickered behind his stare. Not confusion, not fear, recognition. The ship shook again. Another blast, this one closer. Remnant One turned sharply. They've reached the inner sanctum. They will breach in 60 seconds. Zale shouted over the chaos. What happens when he fully wakes up? Remnant One's voice grew solemn. He remembers. A pause. Everything. Errol turned, blood on her face, her voice trembling. And what if remembering breaks him? Remnant One didn't answer, because it didn't have to. They all felt the energy shift in the chamber, like something older than memory had stirred, stretched its limbs, and was rising again. Earth's last sun had returned, and the stars would never be the same. The world changed the moment he stood, not slowly, not gently. It was like reality noticed him again. The air thickened, The hum of ancient machines in the walls shifted into a low, resonating tone that matched his pulse. The light dimmed around him, but his skin glowed faintly. Blue, like bioluminescence clinging to a body that shouldn't have been alive. He stepped out of the stasis pod without hesitation. No stumble, no confusion, just quiet purpose. Zael took a cautious step forward, weapon lowered. "Do you know who you are?" The man turned to him. His voice was calm, steady, unnaturally clear. "I am Isaac," a name that didn't echo through history, not in the archives, not in the human legacy. Just Isaac. Aurel flinched as another explosion shook the structure. The Varn were closing in again, pushing through Remnant One's final defense protocols. The alien corridors were folding, collapsing, trying to trap the invaders. But it wasn't enough. They were coming. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Remnant One hovered beside Isaac, its flickering form slightly more stable now. "You are awake. Too soon." Isaac looked at the destruction around him, eyes absorbing everything. The weapons, the architecture, the digital echoes of extinction. His voice was cold. "Then I was right to stay asleep." Zael stepped closer, uncertain. "Do you remember what happened to Earth?" Isaac looked up, eyes distant, filled with something bottomless. "I remember fire, silence, the sky breaking. I remember the last message we sent to the stars. Not a cry for help. A warning." Errol asked softly, "What were you warning us about?" He turned to her, and for a brief second, she felt like she was staring into a void that remembered gods dying. "Us," he said simply. A silence heavier than any noise followed. Teven leaned against the support beam, wounded but still clutching his rifle. "So what now?" "You go back into your little box and we keep pretending Earth was a sad story with a quiet end." Isaac walked forward, toward the breach where the Varn were now visible. Shadows behind distorted energy fields, preparing to storm the final chamber. "No," he said. "I will show them what we became." Zael reached out. "Isaac, wait. If you do what I think you're about to—" "You came here to find the truth," Isaac cut him off. "You came for the last piece. I am that piece." He raised his hand. The lights bent around his fingers. The walls breathed in response. And then he touched the floor. Instantly, the entire moon shuddered. Not just the chamber. The whole celestial body. A vast network of dormant systems reawakened. Machines older than any alien civilization still breathing in the galaxy. The stasis facility wasn't just a bunker. It was a failsafe, a planetary-scale lock. And Isaac had just turned the key. Energy surged upward, into the ceiling, into the walls, into the broken throne. A digital scream echoed through every frequency the team's gear could hear. Teven collapsed, holding his head. Errol staggered, bleeding from her nose. Zael gritted his teeth. The Varn forces paused. Confused. Some fell back. Then Isaac spoke, not with his voice, but with his mind. Every being in range heard it, whether they wanted to or not. "You have reached for the remains of gods. Now kneel before the ash." The Varn screamed, not in pain but in fear. Something in them cracked. Maybe their implants, maybe their minds. One by one, they dropped their weapons, stumbling backward, gasping. Isaac turned to Zael. "I remember now. Not just who I am, but what we were, and what we tried to bury." Errol pushed herself upright. "What did you try to bury?" His voice was softer now. "Mercy." Behind him, the skeletal remains in the chamber began to glow. Not decay, not fade, but glow, as if their memories were being rewritten. Remnant One watched in silence. Then, slowly, it lowered itself, kneeling. Zael looked around in awe and horror. "What are you?" Isaac looked him dead in the eyes. the last human, and the reason your galaxy still breathes." The Varn did not retreat. They fled. In all their arrogance, armed to the teeth, bred for conquest, raised to believe they were the next evolution of galactic dominance, they turned and ran. Their armor, so proud and gleaming, clattered to the ground as they scrambled over one another, screaming like children in the dark. They didn't understand what they'd seen. They didn't need to. They'd felt it. Not just fear. Reverence. Isaac stood at the center of it all, not triumphant, not angry, just still. As if the whole of him hadn't quite returned to the present. His eyes glowed like burning ice, calm, sad, a storm forever frozen just before the strike. Errol whispered. "How did we fall this far?" Remnant One responded, voice like a prayer. "Because we flew too close to our own reflection and thought it was light." Tivan was slumped on the ground, pale but conscious, staring up at Isaac. "He's not a man. He's a weapon pretending to be one." Isaac turned to him, gaze soft. "Number I was a man. Then the world ended. And they needed something more." Zale's voice was tight. "So, what?" "You're awake now. You've scared off the Varn. The galaxy knows something terrible survived. What happens next?" Isaac walked slowly toward the shattered throne. As he passed, the walls straightened. The light changed hue, from red to a pale white glow that felt peaceful. Not like power reclaiming itself, but like memory taking a breath. This place was built to contain me, a last cage made by those who feared I would forget who I was and become what I was made to be. I volunteered to sleep. I hoped you would never come. Errol looked at him, voice trembling. "Why?" "Because I was the last echo of a civilization that burned everything it touched," Isaac said. "We weren't wiped out. We chose to disappear. We erased ourselves from history, because we saw what we were becoming. We saw this, hunger in us, to conquer, to shape, to dominate." He turned back to them. "And we realized we weren't evolution's gift. We were its mistake." The silence that followed was heavy. Zael finally broke it. "Then why send the message?" "Because one day someone would reach this far. Someone would ask where humanity went. And they needed to know." Isaac's voice cracked slightly. "We didn't die. We chose to end, for the sake of everything else." Arl stared at the floor, her jaw tight. "But you're alive." "I am," he said, "and that is the problem." Remnant One hovered close. "He cannot stay." Zael frowned. "What do you mean?" "This facility. It was never meant to release him. His reawakening begins a countdown, a final failsafe. If he remains conscious for too long, the system assumes containment failed. It activates global sterilization." Tivan paled. "You're saying this whole moon will self-destruct?" Remnant One shook slightly. "Number, not just the moon. The system will attempt to replicate what humanity once did. It will sterilize every trace of the message, every species within reach. It is a mercy protocol, built from fear." Isaac nodded solemnly. "They feared what I could become. They were right to." Zael stepped forward, desperate now. "Then go back into stasis. We'll shut the countdown off. Find another way." Isaac smiled faintly. "There is no other way. You broke the seal when you entered. The only way to stop what's coming is to remove the trigger." Tevin shook his head. "You mean kill you?" "I mean," Isaac said gently, "I have to die. For real this time." "No," Arl said sharply, stepping forward. "We found you. We fought to protect you. You're the truth, our history." Isaac walked to her slowly, placed a hand on her shoulder. It was warm. Human. "You're the future," he said. Zael felt his throat tighten. Is there any other option?" Remnant One paused. 1. They turned to it, all eyes suddenly filled with a sliver of hope, but its next words shattered them. You carry the last of him now, it said to Zale. He touched your mind. A fragment remains, memory, spirit, enough to preserve what matters. Zale blinked. You want me to become him? Remnant One shook its head. Number, you already are. That's why he chose you. Isaac stepped back toward the throne. Then he sat. The system reacted immediately. Light swallowed the chamber. Energy built all around. The countdown was collapsing faster now. He looked up one last time. Not scared. At peace. Tell them, he said to Zale. Tell the stars we tried. And then he smiled. Not like a god, but like a man who finally got to rest. The light consumed him. And then he was gone. The chamber fell silent. No thunder, no cataclysm, just stillness, the kind that settles over a graveyard after the last mourner leaves. Zale stood there, numb, hands trembling, watching the space where Isaac had just been. No bones, no ashes, not even dust. Just air. The kind of absence that screamed louder than any explosion. Auril wiped her face with a shaking hand. He's really gone. Remnant One's form flickered weakly now, dimmer than before. Yes, the failsafe detected voluntary termination. The purge protocols have been halted. The system is mourning. Zale turned to it, voice hollow. Can systems mourn? Remnant One pulsed gently. When they're built by those who learned regret too late? Yes. Teven limped forward, blood drying on his shirt. We came here for answers. I don't even know what we're bringing back now. Zale finally spoke, quieter than before. Not answers, warnings. Auril sat down beside the throne, staring into the faint glow still pulsing from the ancient machinery. You believe what he said? That humanity chose extinction? Zale nodded. I think they saw what we all pretend isn't there, that the thirst for dominance never really goes away, that the smartest species aren't always the kindest, that power without restraint becomes plague. He looked down at his palms, as if checking for something invisible. And maybe he was, because something was there, a presence, a whisper. Not Isaac's consciousness, but something like residue, memory. As if the galaxy's last human had passed on his final thoughts in a language older than words. Auril whispered, So what now? Zale rose. The ceiling of the facility slowly peeled open, revealing a black sky speckled with distant stars. Their ship remained in orbit, summoned by Remnant One's final command. The escape path was clear now. We go back, he said. We tell the story. Teven raised a brow. And what? Warn the galaxy that we were monsters once? Zale turned toward the exit, his eyes harder than before. Number, we warned them that we could be again. Auril followed, silent. Teven sighed and limped after. Remnant One hovered behind, its light nearly extinguished. Will you preserve his memory accurately? Zale paused at the doorway. We'll tell the truth. Even the parts that hurt? Especially those? He stepped into the corridor. As they moved toward the ship, the corridor lit up with every step, recognizing them not as intruders, but as something different now. Carriers of a legacy long thought dead. The stasis moon didn't crumble, didn't vanish. It just closed its eyes again. Far above, the ship opened its hatch, welcoming them back aboard. Systems flickered online, engines hummed. And as they rose into orbit, Zale looked down at the dead rock below. He didn't see a grave. He saw a warning buoy, a relic with teeth, a monument to the idea that extinction is sometimes an act of mercy. The stars were silent, watching, waiting. Ziel didn't know if anyone would believe them, if the Council would bury the truth, if the Varn would return, if the galaxy would accept what humanity really was. But he did know one thing. The message had been received. Not the one Earth sent before it vanished. This one. The last message from Earth, spoken not in code, or sound waves or ancient relics, but in bloodline, in memory, in the decision to rise, and then fall, before becoming what they feared most. And now, 40,000 years later, it still haunted the stars. Because deep down, everyone knew. Humanity hadn't been defeated. It had left, on its own terms, and maybe, just maybe, one day it might come back.